먼저 제1회 글로벌 인특점 포럼에 참석을 하셔서 훌륭한 발표를 해주신 일에 대해서 감사를 드립니다. 글로벌 인특점 포럼은 인재가 미래다라는 주제를 가지고 세계적인 석학, 경제계 지도자, 대학 총장, 그리고 정부의 인특점 정책 담당자들이 모여서 글로벌 인재의 양성에 관한 다양한 의견을 나눴습니다. 코칸 교수께서는 세계 노상계를 이끌고 계시는 노상계의 그야말로 세계 석학이신데 이번 발표를 통해서 지식기반 경제, 또 건강한 가족, 그리고 번창하는 지역사회라는 주제로 아주 통합적 시각, 그리고 아주 독창적인 시각을 저희들께 전해주셨는데 이번에 발표하신 그 논문의 요지를 간략히 말씀해 주시면 좋겠습니다.
Well, thank you, Professor, for taking time out of your busy schedule to attend today's interview. The Global HR Forum has been organized in order to discuss and exchange information regarding HR development, and we have luminaries from all various fields such as the economics, we have some from academia, and we have some prestigious business people as well, and also some people from the government who are in charge of HR development. I understand that your presentation was based regarding the knowledge-based economy, and if you can share with us the summary of your presentation before we begin other questions.
Well, thank you, Dr. Lee, and thank you for the invitation to join this fantastic conference. You have a very, very good lineup of international speakers, and so I'm honored to be part of this process. And I must say, I'm delighted. I have been coming to Korea now for about 15 years, off and on. And each time I come, I see a stronger commitment to human resource development, to economic development. You can see the visible progress that the country has made, and I believe this is exactly the direction that is needed to move Korea to the next level of development, to be an innovation-driven economy, and an economy that utilizes all of the skills of all of its workforce, men and women, high-level professionals, technical employees, people who are on the front lines of delivering services in hotels and in restaurants and on the production lines in your strong manufacturing sector, including the people who are now in small and medium-sized enterprises and often labeled as non-standard workers. So my message in this talk is to bring all of these groups together, to see them all as part of the knowledge economy, to be very inclusive in thinking about how we develop everyone's skills to make sure that no one is left out of this process. Korea is at a stage of economic development and is surrounded by countries and neighbors that are lower cost environments, and so it's absolutely imperative for Korea to develop its labor force to be able to compete on the basis of high productivity, high skills, innovation, new technology, and its utilization, and to use that as a strategy for improving the living standards. To do that, I believe we have to emphasize education, obviously, but new forms of education. Education to participate in a creative world, and that's a major challenge for all of our countries, and perhaps particularly here in Korea, to adapt the traditional education system to encourage people to be more problem-solving oriented, to be more interactive in the classroom and interactive in the workplace, to encourage leadership at all levels of the organization so that ideas flow up, people can debate ideas and solve problems and resolve conflicts. Finally, there's a very strong message in my presentation today that emphasizes the need to build collaborative, high-performing organizations and institutions to support the educated workforce. I believe Korea will develop, is already developing a very talented labor force, but we have to make sure those skills are fully utilized. And that requires labor management relations that are collaborative. That requires firms that listen to their employees, that provide opportunities for their employees to continue to learn, to invest in lifelong learning skills. That requires government leadership to emphasize the task of bringing business, education, labor together at a national level, to be sure. But increasingly, this is so important to do at a regional level, because that's where relationships are built, that's where jobs are created. The new economy is created by new organizations at a local level. Many of these ideas come out of the university laboratories, and so we need to continue to work at that regional level and bring all of these parties together. Those are the main messages in what I have to say here today.
대단히 감사합니다. 전적으로 저도 코칸 교수님과 같은 생각을 가지고 있는데요. 혁신주도적인 경제로 나아가고 혁신주도적인 경제로 성공하기 위해서는 우리 국민 모두가, 일하는 사람 모두가 충분히 능력을 개발하고 그 능력을 활용할 수 있는 사회가 되어야 된다라고 생각합니다. 아까 no one is left behind, no one is left out라고 말씀하셨는데, 현실적으로 보는 것 같으면 지식정보사회 또 세계화가 급속하게 진전되면서 정규직과 비정규직, 대기업과 중소기업, 남성과 여성, 또 노령자와 청장년 사이에 학습과 훈련 기회의 격차가 확대되고 있고, 이것이 고용교육 격차로 이어지고 소득의 격차로 이어지고, 다시 이것이 능력 기회의 격차로 이어져서 사회 양극화를 심화시키고 있다, 이렇게 생각을 됩니다. 이 문제를 그러니까 no one is left out, 이 문제를 바로 풀기 위해서 어떤 사회적인 시스템 또는 어떤 정책적 노력을 해야 되는 건지 여기에 대해서 한번 논의를 해봤으면 좋겠습니다.
Well, thank you very much for your answer. I think in order for us to succeed in the innovation-led economy, I think it is very important to make full use of all of the talents and all of the human resource that we have. And as you mentioned, I think it's very important that no one is left out and no one is left behind in the process. In the knowledge-based information society, there are actually increasing gap between temporary workers and permanent workers, and also those who work in large companies and small and medium-sized companies. Also, gap between men and women, and also gap between the older people and the younger people. So, as the gaps widen, there is a gap also between the opportunities that they get in terms of learning new things, which will lead to a income gap, and also this will also deprive them of other ensuing opportunities, which will make the polarization of the society even more serious. So, in order to prevent this from happening, and in order for no one to be left behind or no one to be left out in the development process, what kind of a system or what kind of policy do you think needs to be in place?
Well, that's a major challenge. Bringing everyone into this process is an issue we face in all of our countries at the moment. We've seen, unfortunately, a growth in inequality, both in income and in opportunity around the world. In my home country, in the United States, this is a particularly serious problem, and I know it's a growing concern here in Korea. I believe that the government has to play a very strong leadership role as a catalyst for innovation by having a safety net that reaches out to people in non-standard work, that brings them into the very basic protections that we expect for decent work, of minimum safety standards and opportunities and protections on wage and hour and other kinds of basic labor standards. That's a starting point, but that's very difficult to do by government alone. The most successful areas where we have seen people in non-standard work arrangements help the most is where government has worked with NGOs, with labor unions, to begin to represent people in new ways, so that the NGOs and the labor unions can be complements support government efforts, but extend government by being out there and helping to represent them. So we see in the United States, for example, that there are new, interesting little institutions being developed to represent freelance workers, both low-wage freelance workers, independent contractors, temporary workers, and higher-level professionals in our country to provide health insurance and opportunities for continuing education. They often get grants from the government or from private foundations. I think the government can work with organizations, whether it's a freelance organization, whether it's a labor union, like in the United States. Our service employees union is increasingly playing a role in communities to help work with ethnic communities, immigrant groups, to reach out, to build coalitions, to provide some of the education services, and to organize them in a very constructive and positive way to provide assistance in getting them into the labor market, upgrading their skills, helping them find access to better jobs, providing training, and working to get support from state governments, from federal government, from private foundations to support that. I think the government can play a very important role, but it requires reaching out and providing support to these emerging groups that can speak for and help to upgrade the skills of non-standard workers. The same with the role of women in our economies, and particularly perhaps here in Korea. I think that as I teach more young men and women here in Korea in our joint program with SKK University and in our leadership programs, I see so many talented women who are ready to play a more active and leadership role in the economy. I encourage them to build mentoring relationships with others in their firms, to build support networks among other professional women, not in necessarily an adversarial way, but to continue to provide support, to organize across firms so that they can provide opportunities for where jobs and development, career development opportunities are, to continue to work together in professional associations to upgrade their skills, and to support each other in working with firms to change traditional practices. So I think we need both government leadership and we need bottoms-up leadership in our society to really make progress, to make sure everyone is included. And it would be a very, very good use of government resources to support that bottoms-up approach.
그 조건을 한마디 하자면 대한민국 여성은 대단히 유능합니다. 그 골프에서도 그 LPGA 그 우승의 거의 절반은 한국 여성이 뿐만 아니고 국내적으로도 2005년인가요? 국내 그 국가고시 대단히 하이레벨 국가고시가 있는데 8대 국가고시 그 수석을 모두 여성이 수석을 차지한 바가 있습니다. 그래서 우리나라 여성의 능력은 대단히 우수한데, 그러나 실제 여성의 경제활동 참가율은 OECD 국가 가운데 가장 낮은 편이고, 특별히 이 하이레벨 고위직의 여성, 관리직, 행정직, 전문직의 여성들은 OECD 국가 가운데서 대단히 가장 낮은 국가라고 할 수 있죠. 그래서 앞으로 여성 인력을 잘 개발해서 잘 활용하면 대한민국 경제사회 발전이 굉장히 굉장히 빠를 것이다, 이렇게 이야기할 수 있습니다. 다시 본론으로 돌아가서 이 비정규직과 여성 문제, 또 고령자, 중고령자를 위한 그 능력 개발이 중요한 것이, 한국은 학교 교육은 OECD 국가 가운데서 가장 높은데, 예를 들어 고등학교 졸업자의 82%가 대학에 진학하는데, 그러나 대학을 졸업한 다음에 직장을 얻은 다음에는 평생학습을 하지 않습니다. OECD 국가 가운데서 한국이 가장 낮은 국가라고 볼 수 있습니다. 앞서가는 국가들이 50% 정도, 평생학습 참여율이 50% 정도인데 한국은 20% 미만이기 때문에 거의 3분의 1 수준이라고 볼 수 있습니다. 그 가운데서 특별히 그 비정규직과 중소기업 근로자와 여성들이 평생학습에서 소외되어 있는데 이분들을 위한 그러니까 기업 단위가 아니고 개인이 아니고 사회적인 학습망이 필요하다고 생각합니다. 아까 소셜 세이프티인데 사회 안전망을 강화해야 된다 이런 이야기 하셨는데 사회 안전망 가운데서 가장 적극적이고 생산적인 안전망이 사회 학습망이 아니겠느냐 이런 생각을 합니다. 소셜 세이프티의 하나의 형태인 소셜 러닝 예술 보다 충실하게 해서 누구도 학습망으로부터 빠져나가지 않도록 아주 촘촘한 학습망을 만들어서 비정규 근로자든 중소기업 근로자이든 여성이든 주부이든 고령자이든 누구나 필요한 능력 개발의 기회를 가질 수 있도록 하는 그런 사회적 학습망을 갖추어 나가는 것이 대단히 중요하고 그리고 이 학습망에 대해서 정부가 적극적인 투자를 하고 그리고 학습망을 이용하는 개인에게 그냥 필요한 지원을 해나가는 이런 노력들이 같이 이루어져야 되지 않겠나 하는 생각을 합니다. 몇 가지
Well, we do have wonderful women talent in Korea, as you may know, the top players in LPGA Korea.
That's right. That's right.
And also in 2005, we have 8 major national exams for the government officials. And the 8 exams, all of the top of the 8 exams were women in 2005.
It's very interesting.
이분은 육상 뭐라 그러죠? 디펜스 아카데미라고 그러나? 육상 밀리터리 아카데미.
Military.
Wow.
Oh, good for them.
So it is very obvious that Korean women are very capable and very competent. However, in terms of the actual economic activities, if you look at the OECD countries, Korea ranks among the worst countries in terms of women participating in economic activities. And also, if you look at the government, we don't really have many high-ranking officials that are women. So I think if Korea makes full utilization of the female resources, it will be much. It will gain advantage in growing further and developing to a new level. So I think it is very important to develop the capabilities or give them the opportunity to further develop their capabilities to not only women but also the non-standard workers and also the elderly workers. It is very interesting because in Korea, 82% of the high school graduates enter universities. So it's among the highest in the OECD countries. However, after the lifelong learning, after graduating universities, the lifelong learning rate is the lowest among OECD countries. So other countries have about 50% in terms of lifelong learning ratio. However, Korea is only 20%, which is only 1/3 of the top-ranking OECD countries. So as you have mentioned, it is important to provide a social safety net to the people in the society that do not have much opportunity to learn continuously. I think among the social safety net, a social learning net is urgently needed for the temporary workers, SME employees, women, and also the elderly. So I think it is very important that the government makes more investment to provide such opportunities to all of these individuals.
Yeah, I believe the issues in making full use of the tremendous talent that you have in your female labor force require institutions that make work more family-centered. We need a family-centered labor market policy in our countries because today work and family are so tightly coupled that we have to make sure that people, particularly women, given our historic norms for the role of women in families, have an opportunity to both be productive in their workplaces and to be effective parents at home. That holds for men and for women. But realistically, women are going to be moving in and out of the labor force perhaps more frequently as they take time for childbirth and maybe for child rearing. That means we have to have a learning set of institutions that provide means for women to refresh their skills when they come back into the labor force, or perhaps even on a part-time basis while they are caring for children at home. That type of learning is dependent on government to work again with civil society groups. No individual firm has a strong incentive to provide that kind of general training. There's a clear market failure in the economic sense of that term. And when one has a market failure that we need, society would be better off if we all invested more in training, but no individual firm has the incentive to invest. That's the place where government has to step in, provide more resources, and then create institutions that cut across firms. So again, I believe the next generation unions, professional associations, community groups are going to be the providers of lifelong learning. Unions have an incentive because they represent people in different organizations, and they could provide more training to keep people's skills current. They could also provide information on where the job opportunities are for people as they need to move back into the external labor market. So if we could provide more resources for supporting professional associations that are willing to develop learning and educational resources, perhaps working with our colleges and university and community educational programs, and if we could get unions to provide those serve more of those roles, and to continue to reach out to women, to non-standard workers, to the groups that are going to need this training the most, then I think we create a virtuous cycle. Because once that training is provided, and once there's a more skilled workforce out there, then individual firms are going to have an incentive to compete for those workers, to encourage women to come back in, to take advantage of their skills, because if they don't, their competitors will. So we turn a market failure into a virtuous cycle where firms have an incentive to also contribute to this process, be visible in it so that they can know where that talent is, and the talent sees companies being progressive partners, and build that kind of partnership. That, I believe, is a absolutely critical role for an innovation economy.
굉장히 중요한 말씀을 해주셨는데, 지금 한국에서 그 교육의 경영을 강화시키기 위해서 시장 원리를 더 강화해야 된다, 이런 주장이 대단히 지배적입니다. 특별히 이제 평생학습과 관련해서는 시장 실패가 분명한 능력이 있는데, 그래서 시장이 실패하는 부분에서는 우리가 기업뿐만 아니라 노조라든지 또는 NGO가 일종의 소셜 파트너십을 형성해서 이걸 추진해야 되는데, 근데 한국의 노사관계는 87년 이후에 노사의 주된 아젠다가 기업 단위에서는 분배 위주라고 할 수 있습니다. 임금 협상과 같은 분배 위주의 아젠다가 주된 아젠다이기 때문에, 이 아젠다는 제로섬 게임이 불가피하고, 제로섬 게임이기 때문에 서로 대립하고 갈등할 수밖에 없고, 또 이런 내셔널 레벨에서 전국 차원에서 본다면 노사간의 주된 아젠다가 노동법 개정이었습니다. 노동법 개정도 서로 일종의 제로섬 게임을 하는 것이기 때문에 서로 대립과 갈등이 불가피했는데, 그래서 지금부터 노사가 이런 분배 또는 노동법 개정을 주된 아젠다로 해서 나갈 수 있느냐. 저는 이제 노사가 인적자원 개발, 그래간 일종의 파트너십을 형성해야 된다고 생각하는데, 어떤 이 노동조합의 이런 인적자원 개발에서의 어떤 롤을 강화시키기 위해서는 어떤 노력이 필요한지, 또는 어떤 계기가 있어야 하는지, 선진국의 경우 되게 90년대에 접어들면 노동조합도 과거의 분배적인 이슈보다는 인적자원 개발에 더 큰 관심을 가지게 됐다고 하는데, 어떤 사회적인 환경 또는 리더십의 역할, 정부의 지원, 이런 계기가 있었는지 말씀을 해주시면 좋겠습니다.
I think you are making very valid points here. And one other question that I want to ask is, Korea recently, in order to reinforce the competitiveness of the education in Korea, many people say that we have to strengthen the market principle in the sphere of education as well. In terms of lifelong education, I think Korea was lagging behind in lifelong education because the social partnership between the labor union, the NGOs, and the companies were not really there, because since 1987, the most important agenda between the employer and the employees were distribution. So wage negotiation was the top of their priority list. And because this led to many conflicts, it was basically a zero-sum game. And on a national level, the labor unions were mostly interested in the amendment of the labor law. So it was also a zero-sum game, and it just led to more and more conflicts between the companies and the labor unions. So in order to strengthen the partnership between the labor unions and the companies, I think we need to look at some different agendas, different than distribution and the amendment of the labor law. So in order to have the labor union a bigger role in terms of HR development, I think this has actually taken place in the developed countries since 1990s. I understand that labor unions are investing more time and energy in developing human resources. And if Korea wants to adopt such kind of change, what kind of an environment do you think we should have? And what should be the role of the leaders, and what kind of support should the government give so that we can have such a relationship between the labor unions where they can actually help foster more talent?
I think it's absolutely essential that for an economy that wants to encourage human resource development and see it as part of its strategy, that it has effective, inclusive partnerships with business and all groups representing labor. We have to bring all of the groups that are involved. Today, in all of our countries, we are seeing a diversity of groups. Not just the traditional unions, but new unions, NGO groups, other groups representing specific women's groups, immigrant groups, and so on. They all have to be viewed as partners in this process. And so in the United States, we just had a split within our major labor federation. And so part of our challenge in the United States is to encourage those two groups that are, to some extent, rivals, to work together on areas of common interest. Not to expect them to always agree, and not to expect them to put all of their differences aside, but to work where there's some common ground and common interest. And I believe education, development, training is one of those areas. So the role of the government is to bring these groups together, to facilitate discussion, to facilitate institution building, to provide maybe some incentive resources for them to engage in training and development, to help them develop the infrastructure they need to play this role. Now, I think there's another thing that we can do and need to do. I agree that too much of wage setting and negotiations have been focused on distributing, not contributing value or expanding the pie and adding value. I believe we need to shift our wage structures and our principles to reward people for continued education, to reward people in groups for improving productivity and improving the competitiveness of our economy. We are seeing in some of our best examples of negotiations now a shift in wage formulas where people are being paid for skill acquisition, for moving up and taking training and getting certified in new skills and being able to do a variety of jobs, and an increased interest in gain sharing. That is, to make sure that as we improve productivity or as we achieve specific goals that enhance the economic performance of firms or the industry, that wages improve as well. We've allowed in the United States at least, and I believe in other countries as well, a growing gap between productivity improvements and wages. That's a very dangerous path. We've got to close that gap so that people see that if they improve their productivity, if they improve their skills, they will improve their living standards.
Oh, yeah.
And that's a goal for the national economy, and I believe there are things that the national government can do to encourage that form of wage determination.
그래서 제가 최근에 이런 주장을 합니다. 노동조합도 주된 관심을, 주된 역량을 인적자원 개발에 투자를 하자, 투입을 하자. 그래서 국가 차원에서 또 지역 차원에서 산업 차원에서 기업 차원에서 노사 또는 노사정이 일종의 사회적 협약을 체결하자, 소셜로직 사회 협약을 체결하자. 그래서 인적자원 개발에 관한 이 각 단계에서의 일종의 사회적 파트너십을 형성하자, 이런 주장을 하는데, 아직은 우리 노동조합이 과거의 아젠다에 상당히 집착을 한다 그럴까. 그래서 이제 사회적 컨센서스를 만들기가 어려운데, 다른 나라의 성공 사례를 우리가 본받아서 일종의 윈윈하는, 파이를 키워서 더 많은 배당이라 그럴까요? 몫을 가져가는 이런 일종의 사회적 파트너십, 사회적 협약을 체결하게 되기를 기대한다. 이렇게 하고, 다음 이슈로 넘어갈까 합니다. 또 하나의 중요한 이슈는 단순히 근로자의 역량 개발, 인적자원 개발만 중요한 것이 아니고, 역량 개발을 할 수 있는 기업 내부의 어떤 조직 체계의 변화, 보상 체계의 변화가 대단히 필요하다고 생각합니다. 아무리 훌륭한 사람이 있더라도 그 역량을 발휘할 수 있는 조직 체계가 아니면, 또는 그걸 촉진하는 보상 체계가 없으면 더 역량을 개발하고 또 역량을 발휘할 수 있는 그런 기회가 줄어들기 때문에, 미국 기업이 80년대 또는 90년대에 많이 도입하고 있는 하이 퍼포먼스 오리제이션, 이런 게 역량 개발과 동시에 기업 조직 체계, 조직 문화의 변화를 동시에 추구한 것이 아니냐, 이런 생각을 합니다. 이거는 미국이 이제 70년대, 80년대에 일본과 독일의 경쟁력에서 패한 원인을, 핵심 원인을 일본의 기업이 예를 들어 휴머웨어 중심의 어떤 기술을 가지고 있다면, 미국은 하드웨어라든지 소프트웨어 중심의 기술 체계를 가지고 있어서, 이것이 결국은 이 기업 현장 이노베이션의 약화를 가져왔고, 이것이 미국 기업의 경쟁력의 약화를 가져왔다는 이런 인식에 출발했지 않느냐 생각하는데, 그래서 미국 기업들이 90년대 이후에 능력 개발과 동시에 조직 체계, 조직 문화의 변화를 관광하게 추진해왔다 생각하고, 이것이 미국 기업의 부활을 가져왔다고 생각합니다. 이거 관련해서 성공 사례, 또 앞으로 나아갈 방향에 대해서 말씀을 좀 해주시면 좋겠습니다.
In terms of, excuse me. Recently, I say this in many occasions that we should try to shift the interest of labor unions from distribution and changing the labor law to the HR development. And I often say that it is very important to create sort of a social agreement between the labor and the companies, and also maybe a tripartite agreement regarding the development of human resources. However, I think it is still difficult because many of the labor unions are still maybe obsessed with the agendas of the past, if you may. So if you can share with us some successful stories where there has been a win-win situation where the labor union has made contributions to developing HR, and how the society was, well, all parts of the society was able to benefit from such efforts. If you can share some of the stories with us regarding that. And secondly, I think not only just development of human resources, but also providing providing compensation based on that is very important, so that we need to have a corporate system or a remuneration system where this can be reflected, the development of HR can be reflected actually in their compensation. And I think when the United States actually lagged behind Japan and Germany maybe in 1970s and 80s, because while the Japanese companies were focusing more on the so-called humanware, American companies were more focused on hardware and software. So this had actually put America in a very difficult position. However, America realized that it was more important to focus on the development of HR and actually give opportunities to the employees to reinforce their capabilities, and shifted their corporate system around that. That has actually brought America back on track, and it has enabled American companies to grow even further. So that is my understanding regarding the development in the U.S. So if you can share with us some actual cases that will allude to this kind of idea.
I agree that tremendous progress was made in the 1980s in trying to catch up, and the first area where there was real progress was in our manufacturing sector. In industries like the automobile industry now, it's standard practice to have what's called a pay for skills or a pay for knowledge work system, where as workers work more in teams, and as they get trained to do the jobs of the different team members, and as they invest more in developing their skills, their compensation increases. So there's a wage system that provides an incentive for people to get certified in new skills. The Boeing Corporation, our big airline, aircraft manufacturing company, has a very good program initiated in the 1980s, jointly funded out of collective bargaining by the machinists union and the company, to put money aside to set up a joint fund to encourage people to do a self-assessment. Here are my skills today, here's my job today. If I want to get to this job over here that pays more, here are the training programs that I need to take, here are the skills I need to be certified, here's a path to do it, and now here's the resources that you get reimbursed for going to school in a technical school or taking some of the other training programs that are available, and once I meet those skills, I can apply for those jobs. That has been a very successful training program. The communication workers, the communication industry has done a very similar kind of thing, and our Communication Workers Union is probably one of the leading unions in emphasizing learning, lifelong learning, skill development as a means of both helping obviously a very rapidly changing industry to remain competitive, but helping their workforce to keep up with all of the wonderful new technologies and skill requirements that are coming along. More recently, we've seen this now move into the service sector. I think one of the most successful and innovative programs is in healthcare in our New York region, where there's a service employees union agreement with the League of Hospitals in New York. They again have a joint program, and the interesting thing about that program is because probably 70% of their employees are women. Many of them are mothers. Many of them are single mothers in very low wage and difficult family situations. They have developed a program that not only provides training, but also provides in their joint fund child support, child and community programs, so that their young children, particularly in the summer, when they're out of school in summer recess, they can go to a child development educational program, child care program, where the children learn and continue and have some social activities and physical education and various things to help them develop, while the parents, particularly many of these single mothers, get training through this joint fund. That is a way of reaching to the people who need the education and training the most, right down there at the front lines of work. Those kinds of examples we're seeing. We're in the very early stages of trying to have a conversation with our healthcare providers in Boston, where my hometown. Boston has some of the premier healthcare, education, research hospitals and facilities. And I think we could develop a similar kind of program in Boston, modeled after New York. In Boston, we don't like to learn from New York too often. We have great rivalry between our baseball teams. But I think in this case, we can learn from New York.
That's great. 예. 그러면 마지막으로 한 가지 이슈만 다뤄보도록 하겠습니다. 한 국가 차원의 인적자원 개발이 잘 되려면 사실은 국가를 구성하고 있는 각 지역 차원의 인적자원 개발이 잘 이루어져야 된다고 생각합니다. 왜냐하면 올라가는 국력의 크기가 결국은 그 나라 인적자원의 크기와 비례하고 한 나라 인적자원의 크기는 결국은 각 지역 인적자원의 합계라고 볼 수 있는데 한국의 경우 지방자치단체의 경우에 도로를 새로 닦거나 새로운 기업을 유치하는 데는 대단히 열심인데 그 기업 활동의 기본이 되는 인적자원 개발에는 그렇게 적극적이지 아직은 않습니다. 그래서 근데 그런 설문조사를 해보면 지역의 인적자원 개발에서 가장 중요한 것이 뭐냐, 누가 가장 중요하냐, 이 설문조사를 해보면 결국은 지방자치단체 장의 역할이 중요하고 지역 차원에서의 파트너십이 중요하다는 그런 설문 결과가 나왔는데, 그러나 아직 현실은 그게 제대로 작동하고 있지 않아서 미국 같은 경우는 아마 지역 차원에서 이거는 지역 파트너십 또 적극적인 역할을 하는 단체장이 있지 않겠냐는 생각이 드는데, 그런 성공적인 지역 레벨에서의 인적자원 개발의 성공 사례, 성공적인 요인, 또 지역 리더십의 역할, 이런 걸 좀 이야기해 주시면 좋겠습니다.
Well, this brings us to the last issue of human resource development at the local government level. Because in the case of Korea, well, I believe that in order for the national human resources development to be successful, it has to be successful at the local government level, because ultimately the power of human resources of a nation is actually the sum of human resources power in every local government. So I guess it's very important that the local governments put more emphasis on the development of HR. However, unfortunately, Korean local governments are still more keen on building roads and bringing more companies into their area, creating more jobs. However, what's most important is developing the human resources that could support such development of the economy at the local level, but they're actually neglecting the most important part. And we have conducted a survey which said that, where there was a question, what do you think is the most important factor in developing human resources at the local level? And people answered that, first of all, it's the responsibility of the leadership at the local government, and also a strong partnership between the local government and the local people. So I guess in order to foster such partnership, it is very important that the leader plays a good role. And I understand this is actually done quite well in the U.S., so if you can share with us some examples, and also tell us what were the success factors and what kinds of leadership were actually very useful in such endeavors.
Well, actually, the experience in the United States is quite varied. We have some very successful cases, and I will give you two examples. But we need to do a much better job on this to diffuse those examples to larger numbers. And the biggest constraint that we find in making these local development efforts work is convincing the leaders to work together. Because you have some of the same adversarial, or business can do it alone and doesn't want to involve labor, or the educational institutions are focused on their particular mission but not engaged in the community. So we've got to provide leadership to bring these groups together. The most successful case that we have seen in the United States, or one of the most successful, is a regional partnership in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It's called the Wisconsin Regional Training Partnership because it's in the state of Wisconsin, but it's really in the major city, Milwaukee, which is an old blue-collar manufacturing city, making the adjustment to more of a service and higher technology manufacturing center. We're the University of Wisconsin, some colleagues of ours who have been very innovative leaders, brought together the labor movement in the Milwaukee area, the business community, and the local university technical schools. And they reached an agreement to work together to both provide training, but then to provide a link to where the jobs are, so that companies made a commitment that they would provide jobs for people who are trained, and they would provide the work systems, the high-performance work systems needed to fully utilize and continue to develop those skills. So that's been going now for over a decade, and it's provided some training opportunities, for many unemployed people, for many African Americans who had been left out of the economic revival of the area, as well as for many workers who were displaced as traditional manufacturing jobs left for other regions of the country or for other countries. So that's one example. Another very interesting example is in Allentown, Pennsylvania. Allentown, Pennsylvania is in the heart of the traditional steel industry in the United States. It was a major steel producing community which fell on hard times in the 1970s and in the 1980s as the steel industry declined, as technologies changed, and as more jobs were lost to foreign competition. So Allentown had to make an adjustment. And one of our students did his dissertation studying Allentown and comparing it to another steel town, Youngstown, Ohio, not too far away. Allentown brought the new entrepreneurs together. They brought the new leaders of new industries and the local universities and the local technical schools, together with the old elites, the old steel industry leaders, the families that were the major families owning the old businesses, and they provided opportunities for these new leaders to engage and to make the adjustments and to be inclusive again. Labor played a role, but particularly the universities and the community colleges played a role in providing the educational infrastructure to say, here's what we need for the new jobs, for the new entrepreneurial young companies, and then they went together to get grants from state governments and federal governments to support these activities. So the key here was to look at the new leaders. Many of them were women entrepreneurs who were bringing new ideas. And so the service, Allentown, Pennsylvania went from very high unemployment, declining wages, young people leaving the community to go find opportunities elsewhere, to now to turn its migration rates around. It is growing again. It's got below average unemployment in the United States. Its wage and income levels, per capita income levels, have started growing again. They are above average in the United States, and it's very successful. Just essentially a few hundred miles away, Youngstown, Ohio, facing exactly the same conditions. The old business elite tried to do it on their own. They kept out the new groups because they were threatened by them. They didn't involve all of the new young people who were coming out of their universities and trying to start new businesses. Youngstown, Ohio remains depressed. It has gotten all kinds of federal grants and money poured in, but they have not started as many new companies. Their job growth lags the country. Their income levels remain depressed, and their unemployment rate remains high. And so here's two communities facing almost the same conditions. One has been a model, and the other has not been successful. So that's why I'm saying we have some very good examples, but we have to learn from those examples. You have started regional development and economic and human resource development programs here, like in your city of Dago, where you have this new forum to work on these issues. I think that's exactly the model that is needed, and I believe that model could be studied carefully, learn some lessons from that model, and then see if that can be replicated in other communities around Korea.
잠깐만. There's something to add more, or I want to close.
No, I think that's
okay. 지금 그러면 이제 넘어갑시다. 오늘 토마스 코칸 교수님과 진정한 인재강국으로 가는 길에 대해서 이야기를 나눠보았습니다. 진정한 인재강국은 인재개발을 통해서 국가가 부강하고 그 다음에 개인, 국민 누구나가 능력개발을 통해서 평생 고용을, 평생 취업을 누리고 삶의 질을 높이는 이런 나라가 아니냐 하는 생각을 합니다. 그러기 위해서는 우리가 남녀노소 또는 정규직과 비정규직 또는 중소기업과 대기업 또는 대도시와 지역의 구분 없이 모든 국민들이 필요한 능력 개발의 기회를 가져야 되겠다 이런 생각이 듭니다. 또 하나는 이런 사회 시스템을 만들기 위해서는 정부의 노력만으로는 불가능하고 노동자를 비롯한 사회적 주체들이 일종의 사회적 파트너십을 형성해서 다 함께 노력을 해나가야 된다. 이런 말씀을 나눴습니다. 대단히 중요하고 앞으로 우리가 인재강국을 추진해 나가는 데 있어서 꼭 고려해야 될 사항이다 이런 생각을 합니다. 오늘 유익한 이야기해 주신 토마스 코칸 교수님 대단히 감사합니다. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.